Hey guys, how are you? This is Ted again, part 3 of skill training. My apologies for not getting this out faster. I know it's much anticipated, especially in the Filipino crew down at the Eclipse Gym. So let's get started because we've got a lot to cover today. In the previous parts, we discussed everything from skill defined to skill educational program, aka periodization. Today we're just going to cover one point, and that's timing of progressions and why. In part 4 we'll cover putting it all together. We're going to go through a practical example of how all of this works. So skill quality and skill capacity. These are the two things as a coach and as a trainer that you really need to take a look at in regards to your athlete, the performer, aka the client. You know, what you really want to take a look at in terms of skill quality is to which degree that the skill meets expectation. You know, and when you take on a beginner, for example, you know, for those of you that are in the fighting arts, you know, the last thing that you would want to do is advance this person all the way to black belt and throw him into the ring, because he's not going to win. There's no way that you could expect him to win. Same thing goes for any of your clients and athletes, is that when teaching new skills, the expectation needs to be set nice and low so that they can acquire the skill that is there, and you can ensure that the skill is properly progressed to meet the overall bigger picture, whatever that may be. Okay? Progressions of the skill should be based upon the learning phases of where the performer is in terms of learning stage. And we're going to go through that in great detail as we go on. Skill capacity. I like to utilize this term in terms of the volumes of training. So if someone can execute a given movement for one repetition in one set, their skill capacity happens to be low, versus a higher skill capacity of a 5x5 or a 10x10 or even a 10x5, or you know, whatever that may be to you. You know, in essence, the first thing that you want to do with your client is to, one, have them acquire the skill. They will have a low skill capacity and then increase their skill capacity. You know, what I like to call is functional strength, or repeated strength is what it's also called in some textbooks. These are the phases of learning, excuse me. And what you really need to take a look at is where your performer is and where your athlete is in regards to these phases. Before you change any of the context of that particular skill, that particular movement, that particular exercise, understand where they are in regards to learning. If they are in the early stages of learning or the cognitive phase, it's not appropriate to change the context of learning or the environment. You know, so let's go through this. The cognitive phase of learning is the first phase. The performer, what you're going to observe, right? The observable performance of that particular skill, all right? The speed of that particular movement or the execution is rather slow. It's very, very pointed. The performer is learning what's expected of them. They are thinking through the problem. Okay? Sometimes they're thinking a lot, and it takes them a while to process all the information that's coming in there. This is precisely why you don't want to talk to them, you know, when they're trying to work it out. Let them do a repetition, let them complete the set. What you should see throughout that set is with each given repetition, there should be an increase of skill proficiency. Okay? If there isn't an increase in skill proficiency, then you as a coach and you as a trainer, you as an instructor, you as a teacher, need to find ways to coach them to increase skill proficiency so they move on in terms of the learning phase. And then you can increase their skill capacity. The associative phase of learning is the second phase of learning. The client, the performer, is still thinking through the problem, but they're not thinking as much as they were in the first stage of learning, or the cognitive phase. What you'll see in terms of speed of the movement has increased, as well as the execution of the movement is much smoother. And as they continue to practice, what you'll find out is that with each given repetition and with each given set, the performance of this particular skill improves. the autonomous phase of learning, third and final phase of learning. What you'll notice is they don't have to think about it. They can do it automatically. Just like walking. You don't really have to think about walking. Right? If you did, you probably wouldn't get anywhere. The speed of the movement is quick. They don't have to think about it. The movement is highly proficient. Means that one, not only do they not have to think about it, speed of the movement is quick, they can also multitask. Now what does that mean? So, ever walk and chew gum at the same time? Well, you're multitasking. Ever have your client doing lunges and they're supposed to be working out and they're talking to you about their kid that is going through college? Well, they're multitasking. Now that may or may not want to be part of the workout. You decide that. Okay, so the cognitive, associative, and autonomous phase is what you utilize to gauge where your client is and when is it appropriate to introduce a new stressor in regards to that skill and or change the context of that skill. Okay, what this picture shows is that there's overlapping aspects of these phases of learning. I don't want you to think that there's a clear-cut line, because there really isn't. There are different levels and different degrees in terms of where your client, where the performer is in regards to this particular skill or any of the skills that you teach them. Okay, they could be high cognitive, high associative, low cognitive, low autonomous, etc. Now, why do I say that? Because you're able to move a given load at 100 pounds. You may be able to do it for 3 sets, but can you do it for 4? Can you do it for a fifth? Can you do it for 10 repetitions? Can you do it for 15 repetitions? Again, look what I'm doing. I'm just choosing to change one context, and that's volume. And what will end up happening is that skill degradation will occur, once a certain amount of metabolic pathways, metabolites is utilized. If you can execute a given skill for X amount of repetitions, that's great. Again, that's skill capacity. I can move 100 pounds for 10 repetitions for 5 sets. That's great. Can you do it for 6 sets? Maybe, maybe not. That's just one aspect to change our context, and we'll get through a whole bunch of other stuff as well as we continue to in this lecture as well as part 4. All right, so in terms of skill enhancement, what should I change in regards to my client and their learning? Well, there are several things. 2 of them are environmental, biomechanical, and as you can see here, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could change. Environmental, you could provide time limits, EDTs within a 2-minute block. So 2 minutes, you're looking for an expected number, and with each consecutive 2-minute block or each consecutive set that's 2 minutes, you want to beat out the given repetitions by 5, by 10, by whatever it is. Targets, you can have someone doing a bench press or a dumbbell reciprocating or alternating bench press to do given targets. You could have the targets move. You could create surface changes to provide some sort of tactile cueing. Temperature, addition of people, is also a good one. Within the fighting arts, because the MMA is so great, usually you're going off of one opponent. The real issue there in terms of the practicality of real world, usually there's more than one opponent. So how do you deal with that? Biomechanically, the intensity, the loading distribution. Okay, this is great. You can deadlift 225 pounds by 10 repetitions by 2 sets. Excellent. Can you deadlift 225 pounds with 20 to 30 pounds offset to one side for the same amount of repetitions? Probably not. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Base of support orientation. An easy example of this is your standard squat versus a split squat, as well as volumes of training. See, the bigger picture here is that, most people, their fitness level will increase as training increases. If you're on a sport-specific, quote-unquote, sport-specific strength and conditioning program, your preparedness is going to go up and your fitness level is going to come down. Now, why is that? Well, we'll use fighting again. The guys over at Eclipse Gym in Manila, we've got a lot of fighters in there, and what ends up happening is that, okay, before their season starts, or before the whole season starts where you know, the whole series of fights are going to occur, these guys are training like mad dogs, right? Their fitness level is going to increase, right? And this means that they could go on long duration runs, you know, marathon like, we'll call it, you know, 10 miles a clip, 5 to 10 miles every day that they can run. The real issue there is that when you're in the ring, that type of cardiovascular training is not applicable, right? So you've got to get them to train their cardiovascular system within the context of the type of fighting and the style of fighting that they're going to be doing, which is why fitness level drops, and that's just an example. And fatigue also drops as well, because not only do metabolic pathways increase, not only do physiologic processes become more proficient, but more importantly, you know, looking at it strictly from a skill perspective, you know, they become more automated. The skill becomes, quote unquote, more skillful. And that's essentially what we do with training programs. We take a given rudimentary skill and get our client to be more skillful. Okay, we have our client squat, then we get them to do front squat, zerchers, you know, deadlifts, whatever it may be, and get them more skillful. Thank you for your time. Look out for part 4.